Alright, somebody sent me or left me a voicemail. It was a question about rest days. Thought it was a good question, so I'll make a video about it. Said, are rest days important? You know, is it good to work out every day? Sometimes he doesn't have full energy and he's doing it and his technique isn't as good because, he's tired. So my opinion on it, based on the way that I train, I just offering my opinion. Training in the martial arts is different than bodybuilding or powerlifting or basketball or football. It's martial arts training, so it's different. And the way that I train myself and the way that I train my students and my family, you're supposed to develop it into a lifestyle. It's not just, your whole life becomes training essentially. And that's what Kung Fu is, that's the way that I teach it. Beginners would probably train 3 times a week or every other day, or 3 times a week for beginners, and then intermediate every other day, and then advanced, you'd be training like every single day. So you want to build yourself up to that, to turn it truly into a lifestyle. So if there's 365 days in a year, then your goal is to train for every single day of the year. But training is not just physical, it's mental and spiritual, it's life. So what is considered training would be when you're meditating, and there's a lot of different ways to meditate. Even sharing affections with your spouse, significant other, loved one, that's part of training as well. That's part of the relaxation and the peace and the love and the physical type of yin training. Reading spiritual books is a part of training. Exercising obviously is part of the training. Stretching is a part of the training. Combat training, the forms, and using combat equipment like the wooden dummy and the punching bag and all that, that's part of the training. So everything comes together as one. Even if you're watching certain movies that give you a deep message about life, gets you to think about things more deeply, understand the world more deeply, that's a part of the training as well. So if you're watching the Bruce Lee movie, if you're watching Matrix, if you're watching Fearless, and it's provoking something within you, not just from a physical, but also from a intellectual and spiritual perspective, that's a part of the training. So life becomes training, but this person is more probably indicating towards the physical training, like how often you're supposed to physically train. And the way that I train, I don't overexert myself too much. The way that I train is almost like the tortoise versus the hare. The hare is just overexerting himself, and he might get to point A to point B quicker, but then he gets so tired that he falls asleep, and then the tortoise just keeps going and going and going, and then by the time the hare wakes up, the tortoise is already way past the hare and then further along the road. So that's how athletic training is usually. The competitive training, like the Olympics and professional athletes, they train like really intense, really hard, and then they retire, and then they give it all up, and then they start going downhill. That's typically the case. But the way that I train, the Kung Fu training, the martial arts that I express, it's more of a gradual pace that just keeps moving along and then you keep training for your entire life, and then from the time of birth until death, you've come a very long way. But it's not like so, you're not aggressively pushing towards that. It's just more at ease. So the typical Western way of training might be running a marathon as quick as they possibly can, and some people try to do it under 2 hours, some people try to do it under 3 hours, some people try to do it under 4 hours. But my way would be just take your time. You don't have to rush, don't have to kill yourself. You're still gonna complete the race, and you might do it. It might take you 5 hours, 6 hours. Doesn't matter. Basically you're not just running the marathon, but you're also enjoying the scenery. You're enjoying the experience. Nature. The weather. You're in meditation while you are engaged in that activity. So the way that I exercise is just very much more meditative, more spiritual. It's not ego-driven. So if it's ego-driven, those are the types of people that might need a lot of rest in between. But for me, I don't overexert myself. I don't really even get sore much at all. And I train in a way where it's like similar to brushing your teeth, taking a shower, going to the bathroom. It's just what your body needs to do. So your body needs to move. So you're not gonna ever wake up and then just lay in bed all day. You're gonna move, you're gonna do something. So that has just become part of my lifestyle. So what you do need though is sleep, and you do need food. So if you're only getting 2 hours of sleep, 3 hours of sleep, and you're tired, then it's not good to train. If you're not eating any food, you're skipping the whole day without eating, and you don't got any energy from food, then that's not good. So training is supposed to be there for an excess of energy. And if you have an excess of energy, then you're going to exert that through physical training. Now, if you don't feel too well, because say you don't have that much energy, then you can still train in other ways. You could do a lot of stretching. Even massage therapy is a type of training. But you could do recovery type of training. Even that's what physical therapists do, help what people do. And that's a part of training. Some of the combat forms that I've developed can be expressed in a meditative way, and it doesn't have to exert so much energy. That's a part of the training. Even when Bruce Lee injured his back, his training was writing. So that's a part of training. Writing your thoughts and your creating. That's a part of the art, creation. So expressing himself intellectually, spiritually, putting things on paper, coming up with ideas, that is a part of training. So when you go to school, usually it's just sitting down and you're listening to the lecture, and then you might take some exams. That's part of training too. So your mind shouldn't be so confined into one way of training, So your body, you gotta listen to your body. If your body is saying, this is too much, some things you could do is, some days you go heavy, some days you go light, depending on how your body feels. If your body is just not up for the heavy training, the heavy weightlifting, then go light. But just because it's light doesn't mean it's not training. Even Floyd Mayweather, I see a lot of videos with him where he's grabbing some really light weights and just punching with it. And that's really light weights, 1 pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds. That's training too. You don't have to be pushing so much weight all the time, especially for martial arts. It's not always about heavy weightlifting. You know, jump roping is just lightly just moving your feet a little bit. It's just very efficient. That's training. You're not exerting that much energy, but it's still training. You know, so you just have to pay attention to how your body feels and listen to your body. But don't confine your mind into thinking, oh, you know, only, because that's what bodybuilders do. Only heavy weightlifting is training, and then you need a rest day in between, and you gotta split up days. One day work the chest, one day work the back, one day work the legs, next day work the biceps, next day work the shoulders. I mean, that's not holistic. That's not the martial art way of training. It's not creating balance and harmony. It's all for aesthetics. It's all for ego. It's all geared towards competition. It's not healthy. You know, these bodybuilders, you know, they dehydrate themselves. They take all these crazy supplements. Some of them take steroids. They do some horrible things to their body, all for ego and attention and praise, and they don't train healthy. They are not martial artists, so their advice is irrelevant, and it's not just irrelevant, but it could be very harmful towards your growth. Essentially, it could even lead towards your death, because they're not training in a healthy way. Martial arts, you train in a healthy way. You listen to your body. So as I was saying, usually I'll do my best to not miss a day of brushing my teeth, because it's very important for me and my hygiene and everything. So I try to go every single day without missing a day of training. My body needs to move. Now, it doesn't have to be like an intense 2-hour session every single time. Sometimes it could be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but you're still moving your body, because your body needs to move. Even when you're sick, you know, if you're not feeling that well, then you can still do something light. You know, you can still walk around, and you could do light stretching, and maybe some light cardio, ride a bike, go walking, practice some forms very lightly. You know, so your mind shouldn't be so confined into thinking that training has to be a certain way. You know, and that's gonna really help you really grow and not be so self-centered and ego-driven, but more working out more holistically. And you know, one of the best things is when you're training, but then you don't know you're training. You know, it's like you're enjoying it so much that you don't see it as a burden. That's what it is. You know, if training becomes bored, you become bored of it. If you see it as a burden, and you don't want to do it, but you're forcing yourself to do it, then you're not there yet. You know, there's still a long road ahead of you. But the real highly developed, you know, martial artists out there in this world, their whole life is training. Everything that they do is training.